I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. Coming up, a guest we've had on before to talk about the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton charity. He is a Wall Street financial expert. He does research for people to look into big time companies, whether it's GE or whoever, and go in and take a look at their financials and see if they are good companies to invest in and see if their financials are good. He does the same thing for big charities like the Clinton Foundation. Let's go ahead and bring him on. He's Charles Ortel. Charles Ortel, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
My great pleasure, Greg.
Well, you said in the past that that on my channel that the Clinton Foundation, the Clintons were Robin Hood in reverse. They were robbing from the poor and enriching themselves. They were the Bonnie and Clyde of charity fraud. And now, lo and behold, they are shutting down the Clinton Global Initiative. Can you tell us what's going on, what the latest is with this? I can't imagine that they're shutting this charity down because they've done too many good things and they are helping too many people. What is going on? What's the difference between the Clinton Foundation, the library, and the Clinton Global Initiative? What's going on with that?
Well, the Clinton Global Initiative was a fraud from the very beginning. It started in September of 2005 as an interesting idea that you would convene around the time of the UN General Assembly in New York. You would convene for a series of days world leaders, former government officials, investors, corporate officers, members of the media in closed sessions where you would talk about high-sounding topics and you would allow different noble people to stand up on stage and say how much money and how much good they were going to do in the guise of charity. The trouble with that is severalfold. The first issue is that the Clinton Global Initiative was an activity so distinct and so different than the main authorized activity of being a library and a presidential archive based in Little Rock that it should have sought approval from the IRS to add this distinct purpose to the list of purposes for which it was approved, and it never did that. Convening meetings, spending, I think in the first year they spent $8 million on a party over the course of 2 years. That is, of course, 2 days, or 4 days, that is not a charity. You know, you have an expensive meal catered at an expensive setting where who knows what is actually done, where you're charging high amounts like $20,000 or so for many people to come inside this closed meeting that's not open to the public. Why is that a charity? The most comparable thing to that I know of is called Renaissance Weekend. That's something based, I think, in South Carolina, which the Clintons were involved with over many years. I checked. That Renaissance Weekend is not a charity. It never tried to be a charity, and nor was this Clinton Global Initiative. So from the very beginning, they kind of modeled themselves on Davos, the World Economic Forum. They held these meetings. They held one in 2005. They gave a tremendous publicity. They involved numerous mainstream journalists, some of whom paid money to attend. And they did this repeatedly until 2009, when somebody told them, hang on, if you want to do this thing, you better register. You better actually be a charity. And they tried to fix the problem, but they couldn't. So what did they do? September 4th, 2009, they created a new similar sounding entity called Clinton Global Initiative, Inc., and they registered that in Arkansas as a corporation, but they didn't apply as a federal charity until the following year. They invited a lot of big people to the September 2009 meeting, including, I think, Barack Obama, who was president, who spoke at this thing. And then they continued it, and then they decided in 2013 or thereabouts, early in 2013, that they better merge this thing back into the parent. None of those transactions was lawfully constructed. You can't enter into a contract that's illegal and perfect it, but they've been trying to pretend that they did. The charity, the Clinton Global Initiative, was not lawfully organized or operated at any moment. The Clinton Foundation has never been lawfully organized and operated as is required by federal law. They've never registered properly in any state, disclosing the defects in their various activities since organization and operation. So the transaction is a sham transaction, this merger. They decided that what they would do would be to shut this wing down at some point, and under New York law, you're required, when you fire more than a certain number of people, you're required to post a notice, and that's what got all this recent publicity. But
they laid off 22 people.
Right. And the active gathering, if Greg Hunter and Charles Ortel decide to create the Hunter Foundation and have a big party here in New York, we can't write those expenses off. We can't fail to explain what the different party participants got out of the meeting, the profits they may have derived by forging contacts behind closed doors. You can't do that. And in New York, the rules are especially tough, as Mr. Trump recently found out. Another wrinkle here is that this Clinton Global Initiative, around about 2007 or 8, decided that they would do a joint venture with a for-profit entity called Laureate. And you're not allowed to do that in New York and create something called Clinton Global Initiative University, using the word university, without making extensive disclosures and seeking approvals in advance, both for raising money and for operating the supposed university. And they never did that.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
So, this is a case of regulatory failure. It is a fraud that began, in my view, the day it was concocted or organized, October 23, 97. You go back into that history, the Clinton family was in deep, deep trouble by that moment for two reasons. One, the various scandals that they've been trying to push away involving Bill, that are the tawdry scandals. The Supreme Court, I think, issued a ruling that denied Bill the crutch of privilege and allowed a private lawsuit to proceed. At the same moment, or thereabouts, the legal expense trust that had been operating came under fire because it was revealed that Charlie Tree may likely have secured foreign money for that purpose, which you're not allowed to do. So their source of funding to stop the scandals was drying up, and their problems were escalating. In that moment, they create this foundation, October 23, 1997, claiming that what they did is they used seed money from the first inaugural celebration as a major portion to fund this library. But there's no record of that. And that inaugural occurred in 97. There's no financial statements in 97 for this foundation, as is required. So this thing, I would argue, has been a fraud from the inception. And the mystery to me is, I understand why it might have operated when he was president, but I failed to grasp why it was allowed to proceed from 2001 forward. In particular, last week we learned that the FBI had been very actively involved with the U.S. attorney, who at the time was James Comey, looking into the question of whether Bill Clinton was using the presidential library during and after his presidency as a bribery means. And there was an extensive investigation. It began, I think, on the 15th of February, 2001. It stretched into 2004. There's lots of documents on file in the FBI vault. Your viewers can look at them for yourselves, and you'll see, Comey himself was leading as U.S. attorney a charge that got to grand jury level, and there are numerous accounts of multiple witnesses being sworn under oath looking into this question. In this entire period through 2004, the Clinton Foundation never provided a real financial audit, as is required to the public, yet it was massively involved in fundraising, using the mails, using phone, using perhaps the internet, across state lines, across international boundaries, while being illegally organized and operated in multiple states and foreign jurisdictions. I don't understand why it wasn't shut down by 2004.
I want to read you something here that it's from the Denver Post. You're familiar with it. You answered this, Denver Post. This says, and I'll just hold it up here, Clinton Foundation has saved millions of lives. This is January 13th, 2017, Denver Post. Now, here's a snippet of it. The Clinton Foundation is a widely respected nonprofit that has saved millions of lives around the globe. Charity Watchdogs gave it the highest ratings. I want you to talk about that. And it continues to do good work even after the election. The Clintons themselves have spent millions of dollars from their own separate family foundation to support this work. It wasn't until the campaign began that partisan attacks and fake news stories took hold. Is the Clinton Foundation being a charity fraud, a fake news story?
I think you now understand why Denver is called the Mile High City. And also the dangers of smoking too much dope. That article is ridiculous. It is ridiculous on many levels. In the first level, you have...
It was an op-ed piece, just so people know. It was an op-ed piece, not an actual news story. Go ahead.
Let me recount the numbers of ways in which that is bogus. In the first instance, there is no causal link between the drop in the price of HIV/AIDS medicine and the Clinton Foundation. There's none whatsoever. The process of getting the price of HIV/AIDS drugs down began while Bill Clinton was president, and in a moment when the Clinton administration opposed that approach, opposed the use of generic drugs. In my view, possibly the original position of the Clinton Foundation, that is to oppose substituting branded drugs with generic drugs, probably was a good idea. And I say probably because in the period from 2001 to 2004, when Bill Clinton and Ira Magaziner illegally held themselves out as being connected to the Clinton Foundation, when neither was an officer or a director or employee or even an agent of the Clinton Foundation, as far as we could tell from available public evidence, they began an effort which they characterized as an effort to bring the price of HIV/AIDS medicine down. But in reality, what they were doing, I think, was serving as a business development agent for Indian and other crooked generic drug manufacturers to try to tap into the aid flows that rich countries like the United States decided to send around the world to help people with HIV/AIDS. This effort was never properly organized. It was never controlled from a U.S. base as is required. There are no records that have ever been audited concerning this activity. There's no evidence that the Clinton Foundation ever got approval from the IRS on the basis of a complete truth application to perform this service. And of the evidence that's out there, there's no way that enough money would have been spent by the Clinton Foundation to help. The upper estimate is I think Hillary said 15 million people. There's the cost of providing HIV/AIDS medicine for free to 9 or 14 million people is a gigantic sum that does not appear in the Clinton Foundation financials. Indeed, there's no granularity of any kind concerning, what they actually may have spent money on as concerns pharmaceuticals, neither by type of medicine, and all types there are many different types. Some are extremely harmful. There's no evidence of the units that were sent, the prices that were sent. And I should add that the courts have held that distributing drugs at a discount is not necessarily a charitable activity. So, for this, frankly, I'm sorry to be so strong in this, but for this idiot to write that opinion piece suggests only that the person knows nothing about charity. On the subject of Charity Watch, you always have to check. It's one of the oldest questions in history is who regulates the regulator. Take a look at Charity Watch. It is a minuscule operation. It does not have the resources to actually examine a charity of this type. This is an enormously complex charity that operates subject to laws around the world that this Charity Watch evidently knows nothing about. This Charity Watch knows nothing about the difference between a report and a real audit. This Charity Watch has never considered.
So the high ratings are bogus.
Yeah, it's just like the debt. I got involved calling these types of things out when I was examining a very complicated company called General Electric. And what I learned then, back in 2006, 7, and 8, was that the regulatory scheme that we have in the U.S. and around the world is not up to the task of regulating these complex multinational companies and charities. They just don't have the resources, manpower, and understanding to know about all these laws. I had the luxury of free time, and I decided this was an important issue, the Clinton Foundation, and I decided I wanted to really learn how charities work. So I spent 2 years on this.
So let's fast forward to today. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to get to the day. To me, when I heard this thing was being shut down after I was on before I found you saying I think she took treasonous bribes to private servers to cover the fact she was committing treason by taking money from foreign countries in the form of donations. That's what I think. Obviously, that's what you think too. Why this move to shut this down? When she was running for president before the election, she was not going to shut this down. She was going to monetize the White House. And she was going to, my daughter's going to do it. I'm going to step away, but we're going to keep it running. As soon as she loses the election, boom! Countries like Australia quit giving money. Donations start drying up. Doesn't this make your point that it was a global charity fraud in the billions of dollars? Why do you think that there's this move to shut this thing down just like that right after the election?
Well, I think what happened here is that the Clintons were caught, flat-footed. If you think back into their history, I don't believe they necessarily expected to win in 1992, right? And similarly here, I don't think they expected to lose in 2016. Suddenly, with the loss and with the reality that Donald Trump is his own person, he's not beholden to anybody. And he had recently sucked it up and paid a $25 million settlement in connection with a far more trivial set of issues involving Trump University and that supposed charity. So he understands this area, and his family understands this area. And I fear what happened here is that this fraud began, and as I say in the very beginning, when it wasn't caught. It was like cancer. The tumors got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it spread from Arkansas to every state. Then it spread around the world. It touches, I think, in fear, the Bush wing of the Republican Party and others. It certainly touched perhaps the Obama wing of the Democratic Party. It began to touch different countries around the world who watched what Bill was doing. After all, he was basically bankrupt, the Clintons were, as they walked out the front door, stealing as much furniture, it turns out, as they could get away with. The people around the world who are in a similar position saw how Bill used, and Hillary, frankly, and Chelsea used their marquee name and their celebrity to garner riches. And other government leaders, I think, started to emulate him, whether it's possibly Tony Blair or the Norwegian leader, the Australian leader, etc. And so this became an unholy mess, and it still is. As I say, it's Tammany Hall on steroids. It operates here from New York. It is a global set of charity frauds. I think the UN, various parts of it, the World Health Organization, UNITAID, the Global Fund, Gavi, a whole bunch of these multilateral, UNICEF, UNAIDS, a whole bunch of these things operate from Geneva, where there are no effective controls at the top of it. There are no real granular, tough audits done on any of this spending. And it goes into countries where, bribery is the national sport. So what else would you expect? You were creating this massive global swamp. And, when I realized what I thought we had here, first of all, I realized that in no way did it make sense to let the Clintons anywhere back near the White House. So I thought that by exposing this, it would help educate the public, and perhaps it did. Now with Trump in, what we have to do is we have to make civilization great again around the world, not just America. We've got to, if we were going to have multilateral organizations, they have to be answerable to the people somehow. And one way to do that is to get into this swamp, figure out how much money has been diverted and stolen around the world and who did it, and get the money back. Now, the useful thing here, in the way our U.S. charities laws work, for those governments, foreign government leaders who are listening to your broadcast, under U.S. law, what you could do is you could go against the private foundation donors to the Clinton Foundation and ask them to get the money back, demand them to get the money back. Private foundations are not allowed to give money, like the Gates Foundation, which has given close to $150 million to this mess, just the Clinton piece of it, and much more to the UN organizations. You're not allowed to give money and say it was to a charity when the charity was not legally organized and operated. And there's strict penalties against, normally, foundations that do that. And there are a laundry list that is very lengthy here.
But hold on, I want to come back to the salient question, the today question. Why are they shutting this down now? Are they trying to cover their tracks? Are they trying to go run and hide? Why do you think that they are shutting this thing down now?
Well, I think in part, most likely, because nobody wants to contribute to it. I mean, that's one reason. Unfortunately, they're going to learn the hard way that the way charity laws actually work, you can't simply shut something down and not answer any questions. Actually, the standard procedure in charity fraud is people will assert that there's some great cause, typically disasters are involved, diseases, children, raise a whole bunch of money and then flee with the money. So the laws are set up to make sure that before you actually liquidate, which is what they would need to do here, that you make full disclosure. And they've never made proper disclosures here. So you're saying,
hold on, I'm going to get in with you. So you're saying that they just can't shut it down and leave town and go, oops, oh, we don't have this anymore. Sorry, we don't know what went wrong. You're saying they, no. They have to account for the money. And this is even a higher bar, I suspect. They have to account for the money they took in to shut this down. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely. And so going back to the Clinton Global Initiative narrowly, what they tried to keep from public view are all the crooked side deals that people who showed up at the supposed love fest for charity concocted, having gained the context they got in the initiative meetings. So I'll give you a case in point. After I think it was last year, after a lot of criticism, I believe it was Chelsea who in a meeting stood up and said, "Oh, you don't understand. We're doing all kinds of great work in the Clinton Global Initiative." And she cited one example, which is a crazy company called Urdu. I think it's Ouredoo, which, back in the peak bubble moments, if you had an idea that with global appeal, you give it a crazy name and you take it public and boom, everybody makes money. What was Urdu? Urdu was Qatar Telecommunications Corporation, controlled or heavily influenced by the diabolical Al Thani family of Qatar. And they were based basically just in Qatar. Public offering of a Qatari telecommunications company is of little interest to anybody. But what they wanted to do was to give it sex appeal. So they worked with the Clinton Foundation. They had the Clinton Foundation go to Burma and Indonesia and, in theory, interview rural women in those countries about what cell phone features they might want to get. If service were offered in rural areas. And with that, they were able to secure the mobile licenses to operate in Indonesia and Burma. Suddenly, Qatar Telecommunications Company becomes more interesting and it goes public. There are multiple deals like that concocted out of the Clinton Global Initiative, and every single one of them is what's called illegal private gain. You're not allowed to operate a charity, create more than collective private gain that is, in quotes, insubstantial. And that has been held to be less than $1,000 collectively for the group. And you look across the spread of Dennis O'Brien's various Digicel projects around the world and numerous other billionaires who say they've given money through the Clinton Global Initiative, but there's no records of it. I mean, if you sat down, with Sherlock Holmes and a real FBI and a real CIA and a real team of investigators collaborating around the world, and you made it a crowdsourcing project where you would look in to find out every single one of these commitments to action, and you categorize them all, and you punch in, for example, Siemens supposedly was involved doing charity work. Punch in Siemens and fraud into Google and see how many entries you get for Siemens. And then punch in a whole bunch of these other names that supposedly were involved with the Clinton Global Initiative with the word fraud. And it's hysterically funny and sad what comes up. The number of fraudsters who have associated themselves with the Clinton Global Initiative is immense. So, of course, they're trying to cover their tracks. But what they don't seem to understand is that with charity fraud, the burden falls on the targeted charity to prove that it was lawful. It's not the government's responsibility to go in and find the fault. And so if you destroy these records, which I fear they're doing, you're only compounding your problems. And because this is a charity that operates not simply in New York and not in Arkansas, but around the world, even if you cure your problems in New York and Arkansas, you may still have problems in numerous other countries around the world. And that's a process which I think is accelerating now, that Barack Obama apparently did not pardon any part of the Clinton Foundation, any person in the Clinton Foundation or any advisor to it. So now it's open season.
Yeah, that's what I made a special point in my weekly news wrap-up. Just on his last day, I said, a special note here. Not only did he not pardon Snowden, which probably should have gotten a pardon, but he certainly did not pardon Clinton, Hillary, Chelsea, Bill. Nobody got pardons with this fraud. Are you hearing that? I've seen headlines, not very much in the press. I mean, this is just a lie by omission. This is a huge story, as you have just laid out. It's a global fraud in multiple countries, in multiple companies, big name people, and there's no way that Congress and Comey and the investigators don't know this is going on. There's just no way this is not known as common knowledge in Washington. Do you think that charges are coming for the Clintons?
I think, yes. I mean, I hope so. I mean, basically here, what you're talking about, this is not a charity. It's a predator's ball. And, what's really awful here, Greg, and one of the reasons I did get involved in the very beginning is I had originally felt that the bulk of all monies contributed towards charity came from the very rich, but the data show otherwise. It's actually the people who probably shouldn't be giving money to charity because they're scraping by, but, there's so many generous hearts in America and around the world. It's those people who, will put money into a jar and not expect a tax deduction. And, that money comes flooding towards supposed celebrities and leading lights who say they are doing good work around the world. And, this is just a textbook case of a charity run amok. And it's not one time only. I mean, this is a serial predatory fraud that rose. Believe it or not, the section of Little Rock where the library now is once was called, I'm told, Muddy Waters. This thing came out of the muddy waters of Little Rock, and it oozed around the country and spread across oceans around the world, corrupting, the system. And we need to understand why the regulators in Arkansas, in New York, around the world, in the IRS, why the regulators haven't done anything. Is it because, I fear, that people in both political parties in this country and in similar situations around the world are all implicated? If so, I think we're at a moment in world history, thanks to what happened with the Trump revolution so far and what's happening in numerous other countries around the world, where we're sick and tired of listening to supposed experts who don't disclose their two true conflicts. We're sick and tired of hearing, that everything's great when we know it's not great. And in this realm of charity, this must be a place, and I believe it is a place, because I'm speaking on right-leaning and left-leaning and independent and international media now. This is a subject where I hope we can all agree that people who perpetrate charity fraud are one step above pedophiles. I mean, it's a horrible thing to do. Diverting money from desperate people.
The media has not covered this. I mean, I stuck my neck out and put you on, and I did as much research as I could on you. I have always believed you to be a real guy, that you're forthright, that what you're saying is true, and now it's kind of panned out that they're shutting this thing down. So just by their own actions, it's true. You've been on other media outlets like Fox, for example, and they haven't really hit this very hard. And one of the things you said was, well, they were afraid that Hillary Clinton would win. Is that part of the reason why that this has not come to light before the presidential election? That even people like Fox, who are pretty anti Clinton, that would break stories. Is that why this has not come to light? That people are afraid of retribution from the Clintons?
Again, I would just be guessing, but I think we can see in Clinton history that when they held the reins of power, they did not tolerate opposition. And, the difference between a potential Hillary Clinton presidency and the actual Bill Clinton presidency is that when Bill was president, they were basically paupers. But had Hillary gone in, they would have had substantial wealth and the ability to, dial it up.
She would have, in your mind, if she would have won, she would have monetized the White House.
Again, I would say. not for the first time. They would have done it again. And so, and they would have gone after their enemies. They may still do that or try to do it. But, in this case, what we have here, Greg, thanks to your work and thanks to the work of the tireless new media, and some on the mainstream, some in the radio and television land, many actually internationally, what we have is a case where I think that people are looking at this, finally through open eyes. And we now have the ability in a group effort. I've being contacted now by many people around the world who are rolling up sleeves and looking hard inside their own country at what may have happened here. And I think what we're going to find is a cascading mountain of new implicating evidence. I'd remind your viewers that the missing emails were never actually deleted from the internet. It's impossible to do that. And so those are going to come out one way or another. And I believe, I followed the WikiLeaks thing very closely, and I was amazed how few of them deal with the period November 2008 through 2009, when the Clinton Foundation was reorganized. I believe there are smoking gun emails out there which express shock on the part of the Obama administration as to what they actually found once they became struck in as president. When they negotiated the memorandum of understanding that regulated this relation between the Clinton Foundation and Hillary as Secretary of State, Team Obama had no inside dope on the foundation, but afterwards they must have had inside knowledge, and they must have been able to see that this was a fraud. So
he was conversing with her with his own private email address. I'm running out of time, but I want to get one last thought in here. I was surprised by this. President Trump said he was going to apparently keep James Comey, and I wonder if he's keeping him because he knows all about the Clinton Foundation, and he's going to give him a chance to a reprieve, so to speak. Do you think that's the reason why he's keeping Comey? Because he's going to turn him loose on the Clintons and say, you know all about this. What's going on? Bring a case. Do you think that's true or not?
Again, I don't really know, but I would say that what I do know about the way the justice system is supposed to work. It's in theory, decisions like this are supposed to be made by career prosecutors, not political people. And if you are looking for a way to drain the swamp, what better way than to police these charities? I think they haven't really been policed. There are over 1 million of them, and there are a lot of big ones. Because the theory is, who would get together and corrupt a charity? You're not going to. It's not going to be that fertile ground. Was the theory, and I think the reality is, indeed, it is fertile ground. It's tough to make money these days. Getting grants from a charity that aren't really policed, is a nice way, if it's corrupt, to line your pockets. It's a nice way to curry favor with politicians. And if you know that you're never going to be investigated because you put Lois Lerner in charge of the department, then suddenly you have an ace in the hole. Most people will assume that you're actually involved in charity. I mean, take, for example, to pick on somebody who deserves to be picked on, take Media Matters. That is a total fraud. It is a political action organization masquerading as a charity, which is highly illegal, and yet it goes around intimidating people in journalism. So to get back to a question I didn't really answer fully, journalists, they are inclined to lean left, I'm told, and they're inclined not to be that numerate. To understand this story, you got to understand accounting, you got to do your homework, got to have an open mind.
You think charges are forthcoming? And if you were a betting man, would you bet charges would be forthcoming?
I don't know how they're going to resolve this, but a simple way to get, to pile gasoline on the fire here is to suggest, as I will now, that, I think this will come to a crescendo in at least one jurisdiction around the world, probably many. And I think it would behoove anybody who knows the inside story here and who understands that they're going to spend time in prison to come forward soon before the charges are made public and help the various authorities, the FBI, the U.S. attorneys, the foreign authorities, with their inside knowledge. Because the second these governments actually decide to press their case, and there are some rough governments out there, the French government, for example, the English government, our government.
They have to be all pissed. If the ones that were unwittingly involved in this have to be angry.
And I would not want to be the functionary who thought they were going to be protected by Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton or the Clinton machine, whose head is then served up on the chopping block to keep the Clintons out of trouble. I wouldn't want to be that person. So there are a lot of people like that in this mix and all these different charities that still, in quotes, operate. They ought to think hard about calling up the FBI, calling up the U.S. attorney, following up, maybe contacting you. They need a lifeline, because if they don't come forward soon, I think their lives are going to be even more miserable than they might otherwise be.
So you're hearing that charges probably are coming, in either internationally or around the world. You're thinking illegal action, charges, criminal action against the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation. You think, if you're a betting man, you think they're coming.
I think the case is overwhelming, and the public interest is great, I think, in draining the swamp by forcing trustees who have a high legal operation under our and other laws to discharge that obligation and make sure that when they contribute money to something that supposedly is a charity, that it really is lessening the burdens of government and is a charity.
And how do people contact you, Charles Ortel? Do you still have your website? How do people contact you, and how do people read up on your work and things that you're doing? Because you're doing a lot of work on this Clinton Foundation. How do they contact you?
Thank you very much, Greg. I mean, the easiest way is through Twitter, @Charles Ortel. My website is, again, charlesortel.com. You can contact me either way. And I try, actually, I've been very busy on some forthcoming work. It's incredibly intense, detailed stuff. So I haven't been posting much on the website, but I do tweet regularly.
Okay.
And I appreciate the chance to come on your show.
I'll put the links up for charlesortel.com, and then you get your Twitter handle is what? Charles Ortel?
@C Charles, O Ortel.
Okay. Charles Ortel, thank you for this fabulous update. The media is covering up a story that makes Watergate look like somebody stealing a penny off of your parents' dresser. I mean, it's unbelievable that the media is this reckless and lying, and they can't. It's so big. It has to be a lie by omission. Nobody is this stupid in the media. in my humble opinion, who worked at 5 TV stations and 2 networks as an investigative reporter, nobody can be that stupid to miss this story, in my humble opinion, as a journalist. Just can't be. It's a lie by omission. Thank you, Charles Ortel, for being on USAWatchdog.com, and thank you for sticking your neck out long before all the time we were told that Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in for the presidential campaign. You're a hero, my friend. You stuck your neck out and told the truth, and thank you for telling it here on USAWatchdog.com.
My pleasure, Rick.